Touchdown Tampa Bay. You're listening to the PewterCast.
Welcome to the PewterCast. This is our final thoughts episode where we will be grading out the Bucs versus Falcons in their Monday Night Football game from this past week. I am Brent Allen, your host, joined as always by Ren Dax, my traveling co-host who is out and about for the holidays. Ren, how's it going in the frozen tundra of the North?
I don't know about the North. This is still considered the South, which is weird because, I live in Florida, to be honest. Like, you sort of go south of Gainesville or Orlando, I guess. Mm-hmm. No, Gainesville. You're really not in the South, like quote unquote south of the United States anymore.
Right.
So I had to travel, 800 miles north to get to the south of the United States. I'm in North Carolina, in a town called Brevard, just outside of Asheville, really just up the road, just like a little 20-minute drive up the road. And yeah, everything's, it's cool. It's a nice, brisk, 65, 64, something like that outside. Sun's down, so it's at night. I guess it snowed here last week, but it got nice and warm for me. So looking forward to doing some hiking and little window shopping and having Christmas with Cheryl's fam. All of who I'll be meeting for the first time. Hooray.
Ooh. Yeah, speaking of the whole South thing, I often have to explain to people that living in Jacksonville actually still qualifies me for living in the South of the United States. It's people are like, Florida's not really a part of the South. Well, this part is, because it's go
to the Panhandle.
Yeah, we got our fair share up here. So, but hey, anyway, I want to say happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everybody out there. It is that week. We will be having a game actually coming up on Christmas Eve. I can't remember the last time we had a Christmas Eve game. Probably about 7 years ago, if I'm guessing right. But anyway, we will certainly be covering that. And Ren, you and I will get together and we'll figure out what the show looks like for next week. But for right now, why don't we go ahead and get into tonight's show? We are going to be grading out the Falcons game, wrapping up any closing thoughts that maybe we didn't get to touch on in our Instant Cast show this week. And then to wrap up the show, we're going to be taking your questions, your comments, and emails from your fellow fans. All of that's coming your way on today's episode of the PewterCast.
Everybody knows there's not a better time of year. Hear that sleigh, Santa's on his way. Hip hip hooray for Christmas vacation. Got a ton of stuff to celebrate. Now it's getting closer, I can't wait. Gonna make this holiday as perfect as can be. Just wait and see this Christmas vacation. This old house sure is looking good. Got ourselves the finest snowman in the neighborhood. Ain't it fun? Always on the run. That's how it's done on Christmas vacation. Let's all let the homes and light the lights.
Welcome back to the PewterCast, and now it's time for Ren and I to kind of put a capstone on this Falcons game with our final thoughts and grades for the game. Now, in case you didn't get to see the game, the Buccaneers took on the Atlanta Falcons in their fourth divisional matchup of the season, but this time it was under the big lights of primetime on Monday Night Football. By halftime, the Falcons were up 17-7, and the Bucs actually wound up staying in it, battling through Ren, I think it was a season-high number of injuries in a single game of 10 injuries, people who got added to the injury report. One guy actually got carted off the field and had surgery late night last night following the game. And in the end, the Buccaneers attempted a 54-yard field goal to tie the game with just 4 seconds left on the clock. But despite what Ren and I both thought we saw, it went wide right and missed and ended the game 24-21, Atlanta over our beloved Buccaneers. Now, Ren, you and I actually last night, because we're actually recording this pretty close to after the game, we got to spend some time with the Instant Cast, and you and I kind of really got to focus on the game a lot. I would encourage everybody to go back and listen to that show if you haven't yet. We really dive in a lot to some of the offense and defense and different things we saw right there in the game. But now I ask you, Ren, now that maybe you've had not quite 24 hours, as it were, actually, and you've not been doing anything at all today. Like, you've just been laying on your couch, sleeping, just mulling over this game.
Yeah.
What are your final thoughts, and how would we grade out this game?
I feel like I'm a broken record. You know, the Bucs found another way to lose a football game. If it's not Jameis with a incredibly costly turnover, or it's not the defense, letting the team drive down the field to either tie it or, take the lead, break the tie, or extend it to 2 scores with only, with under 4 minutes left. This time the defense stepped up at the end and got the ball back for the offense, and we missed the kick. Mm-hmm. Offense drives down the field. Like I said, they found another way to lose a close and competitive ball game. And I guess that's really the broadest I am right now. To narrow it down a little bit, moral victories are sort of a loser's mentality. Mm-hmm. But for, like you said, going in so hobbled and then playing the game even more hobbled. I think only one player came back of the 10 people that got injured that game. Like, only one returned. Mm-hmm. So they
Ryan
had 9
Smith,
guys,
and I think he went out a couple of times. So
they had 9 guys go down and not come back into the game. Mm-hmm. So that number's astronomical. Mm-hmm.
Not to mention the people were already missing going into the game. Like, we were already missing Gerald McCoy, already missing Levante David, first-round draft pick from last year, Vernon Hargreaves. Like, missing quite a few people.
So if you start to throw that in perspective, and what a great game Jameis had, and I'm sorry?
I didn't say anything.
Hello?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, sorry. What a great game Jameis had, and not only that, that narrative's been out there about how Jameis gets too hyped up for games sometimes, especially primetime games. Mm-hmm. His first primetime game on Thursday night 2 years ago, he gets in a fight like with Aaron Donald. Last year in Dallas, the game gets flexed to Sunday night, and he takes a personal foul because he jumps on top like a defensive end and knocks us out of field goal range, and moves it to 1st and 25 instead of 1st and 10 or whatever it would have been. But he looked like the quarterback that we all been hoping we'd see. Mm-hmm. And I think he's played pretty close to that, even in the Green Bay game. Take away, it's really not fair. Well, you take away this, you take away that. But I think his accuracy and him squeezing the ball in the small windows, except for this game, the Falcons game, he didn't have any turnovers. I think the play's kind of been there. Like, it's been sort of the same. And I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but maybe, and we talked about this, that maybe having those 3 weeks and just watching Ryan Fitzpatrick, not flip out over everything and, try to score 10 points every time the offense gets the ball. He might have really taken it to heart and be a lesson that he learned, that it might have taken him, who knows how much longer to learn if he didn't, have to sit those 3 games. So outstanding play by Jameis.
Yeah, and I want to bounce off that real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So our friend Trevor Sickham over at PewterReport.com posted up a video of I think it was Matt Hasselbeck or someone on ESPN or
one of the Hasselbecks.
Yeah, one of those guys. And they were talking specifically about Jameis and what he needs to do to go to the next level, like what he needs to do to actually become elite. And basically what Hasselbeck was saying is listen, Jameis needs to not get so overamped. He's got to go out there of all the people on the team. He's got to be the calm one. He's got to be the cool one, the collected one. He can't feel like he has to, that whole, he's got to, what is it you say, Ren? He's got to score 10 points every time he makes a touchdown or something like that. Like, whatever. Yeah. Every time he touches the ball, like he needs to stay calm and cool. And specifically, what he was saying was he needs to give up the rah-rah speeches. He can't get out there and fire up the team because then he gets out there and he's all jittery. Now that's something that we as fans have noticed and has been talked about, not extensively, but has been talked about enough. We're kind of saying, maybe he should maybe not do that. Now. I don't remember the last game if Jameis was the guy who was given the big rah-rah speech at the beginning, but we do know, and we saw video, Jameis was the guy doing that speech at the beginning of the Monday night game. However, that said, I still feel like Jameis came out and however he was able to make that transition from getting everybody fired up to being this calm guy, because I feel like that's what we have seen out of Jameis since he's come back, which I think is what you were just alluding to there. Like he seems to be more calm and more cool and more collected when he's out there. Minus a couple of times where he gets a little overheated. I don't think we saw that really at all last night. So however he's been able to make that transition, I think has been fantastic. And, I don't know that it necessarily requires him to not give those rah-rah speeches anymore, as long as he can make that transition.
Yeah, there was a couple times last night, but it didn't end up hurting the team. Like, remember that one time I looked at you and I go, why is Jameis throwing a backside block?
Oh, yeah.
Remember? Mm-hmm. He hands the ball off to Peyton Barber and then, just sort of jumps to the way of the defensive end that's crashing down the backside of the line of scrimmage. And then on that last drive, when Godwin dropped that contested pass, and I was so shocked about it, I actually looked at you and I go, wow, you don't really see that. Mm-hmm. Because it seems the more traffic Chris Godwin's in, the higher likelihood he is going to catch the ball. Mm-hmm. And I sort of looked at you, then I looked back down, and there's somebody patting Chris, sort of like helping Chris Godwin up and patting him on the head. It's Jameis. He ran down the field, helped him up, and patted him on the head. Like, okay, we'll get him. And by all intents and purposes, the offense did their job. Mm-hmm. So there were still those things where you're like, okay, but it's just not like the franticness in the huddle. It feels like, like in the pocket, like that overwhelming feeling once again. And I've said it, you've said it, where every time the offense gets the ball, he's trying to score 10 points, and it can't happen. It's like golf. Like, you can't win a golf tournament day one, but you can lose it. You sure can knock yourself out of contention. You can't win it. Like, you'll never win it, on Thursday, but, you can definitely shoot an 8 over and have no chance of winning. And I feel like that's sort of the attitude that Jameis has to take when he gets the field. Like you heard Monken last week. Like, he has to understand that every possession has to end in a kick, either a punt, an extra point, or a kickoff. Extra point, a punt. Yeah, that's it. Isn't it? Uh-huh. Or a field goal. That's the other way to score. God, sorry. I've been traveling
I was keeping that in my head with the same thing as a field goal, but yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're saying the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. I'll, before I go, do you have anything else you want to mention? Kind of as final thoughts on the game.
I think we're going to be real trouble against Carolina defensively.
Yeah.
I think the Carolina is going to take the exact same approach. And I know this isn't a final thoughts thing, but even though the defense hung in there and did get us the ball, they did not get off the field that much on third down. Rarely did they. And when Atlanta got the ball, it was the outlier that they punted. They were usually taking the ball and keeping it for a long period of time as they slowly drove the ball down the field to put points on the board, which really shortened the game. And I think you're going to see the exact same thing from Carolina on Sunday.
Yeah, because there were even times, several times during yesterday's game, when the defense had them in a 3rd and long situation, and it wasn't a big deal for Atlanta. Just, they got a 12-yard pass when they needed, when it was 3rd and 9.
8.
Crap. Yeah. I mean, okay, well, I guess we keep going then. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to my grades. As far as big things from the game, Ren, you and I last night in the instant cast, in a rare form, just because of technological things, we were not able to take phone calls. So it was really just you and I talking very specifically about the game. I think I talked about everything specifically to the game itself, which is why, again, I point everybody back to make sure you go listen to that episode. But just a couple of thoughts. One, I want to say this. Despite his missed kick yesterday, I'm still glad that we have Pat Murray as our kicker.
Yes.
I particularly loved his press conference. I have a hard time calling those press conferences. They berated him at his locker. Someone was trying to give him an out, like, it was a long kick. It's really hard for any kicker. And Pat Murray cut him off and said, it doesn't matter. It has to go in. It doesn't matter. It has to go in. Like, period. I love that coming from any player. No excuses. You either do it or you don't. I think he's going to take this. He's going to take this one personal, and he's going to go back and you can bet your sweet bippy that he's going to be out there like Tiger Woods on a driving range after having a mediocre drive on hole 14. He's dialing in his shot. He's going to be practicing it. He's going to be able to put it exactly where he wants to put it. We've heard Pat Murray a few times on like Buccaneers Insiders Live. Then he did the thing out at Ford's Garage with the Pewter Report guys. We've heard some interviews with him, so we've kind of gotten to know him a little bit that way as an individual. And this is going to be something that sticks in his craw, and it's just going to go make him a better kicker. So
I almost did it. Craw, not Craw. Craw. I don't even know how it goes. Sorry. You know what I'm talking about, though, right?
I have no clue what you're talking about.
Do you not listen to Ira Kaufman's podcast on the reg?
I do. Why? Is that so? I don't think I don't recall ever hearing it. I'm usually doing other stuff while I listen to those. So
the word is craw, but like early on in the first handful of episodes, I think DeKemper said crawl.
Oh.
And he's like, crawl, it's not crawl, it's craw. So about every other episode, so I guess once a week, DeKemper will just blurt that quote out every time he uses the word craw. He's like, I know it's going to stick in your craw. Craw, not craw. Like he can't do it. It's like nowadays when someone says Bud Light, like somebody has to say dilly dilly. It's just something they has to do. So
and just be annoying, and you want to punch them every time they do.
Yeah, I really like dilly dilly. I'm really sad it got the wrong people started using it for the wrong. It just caught on so. I don't want to say pop culture, but when sort of like big business starts to take it and use it, like when you see like Monday Night Football, like the guys on Monday Night Football doing it, like when that starts to happen, then you're like, okay, now it's over.
Well, it was like their campaign a bunch of years ago. The "What's up?" that one.
Oh God!
If you noticed.
that one did.
I think we lost anyone who was about 25 years and younger. I have no idea what we're talking about there, but. Anyway, Pat Murray, glad he's our kicker. And you know what, Ren, now that you say that, I'm probably going to hear that and pick that up every single time I listen to the Ira Kaufman podcast now.
You will.
It flew right over my head before, so I appreciate that.
I have ruined it for you.
Me and for everyone else out there who may have never noticed that listening to Ira's podcast. So, yeah, like I said, real glad Pat Murray's still our kicker. You mentioned moral victories a minute ago. I'm not okay with moral victories, but in this case, I'm going to make a little bit of an exception. I do think the team as a whole played their asses off. I think they showed more guts and grit and determination than I don't know when. I don't. And here's the thing: I don't know if it's more than what we have seen all year, or if it was just highlighted because it was Monday Night Football, or maybe it's highlighted because they're already now actually eliminated from the playoffs. I don't know, but last night, just I don't know. People talk about there's no quit in this team. And there should be. There should, by all rights, there should be a lot of quit. Or at least there could be. I don't want to say should. There could be. And there has been before in previous teams. There's not in this team. And, I'm proud of the guys for that. And they hung in there. And it was a hell of a game. I did have one thing I wanted to talk with you about before I get to the grades. Actually, two things. But the first one is this. We had this big thing this past offseason, this weapons for Winston, right? Or get more groceries in the cabinet or whatever you want to say it. And then we talk about these injuries that mounted up over the course of the game, right? And I feel like, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, Ren, I might be wrong, but I feel like the more of those weapons that kind of got taken out of the tool bag for Jameis to use, almost the better and sharper we got on offense as the game went on. And what I mean by that is, there is such a thing as frequency, like the frequency that Mike Evans gets targeted. The more often he gets targeted, truthfully, the better he's going to be, the better his numbers are going to be. If you only target him 3 or 4 times and he misses, if those 3 or 4 times happen to be bad throws or he's in double coverage or triple coverage or whatever, maybe he doesn't make that. But if he gets thrown 7, 8, 9, 10 times, 12 times a game, there's more of an opportunity to do well, right?
Right. Yeah.
And, I think Mike Evans got targeted more yesterday than we've seen almost all season long. And look what happened, right? He finally got scrappy. He came down with the ball. It wasn't double. I think it was triple coverage, right? There in the end zone when he finally came down with that ball.
Well, before he cleared everybody out with his tornado punches.
That's what I'm talking about. Yes.
That second one, oh my God.
Right.
He just picked that guy up and threw him down and caught a touchdown pass. Flag? What are you talking about?
Right.
Flag?
And I mean, it reminded us why we love Mike Evans.
Or the actual touchdown.
The actual touchdown. The one where he actually came up with the whole thing.
That was double coverage.
Yeah. So, but either way, we finally got to see, why we love Mike Evans. Reminded us why we love Mike Evans. Because Mike Evans has not been flashy this year, right? Now, when you think about it, it's a true thing, right? If you think, you get about 60 plays on offense, half of them are run, half of them are pass, about, if things are, copacetic, that means you got about 30 pass plays. Now, with Evans, Deshaun Jackson, Adam Humphries, Chris Godwin, Cameron Brate, O.J. Howard, Charles Sims, who's going to be catching some passes. Occasionally, you're going to get a couple out to Martin or Barber, whoever the case may be. Not to mention there's the few to the Martinos and the Auclairs and the Crosses and those guys that kind of get in there. So if you're lucky, if you're Mike Evans, you're getting, 3 or 4 targets a game if you're spreading it around?
Yeah.
Right? Now, we always talk about spreading it around and kind of giving accolades to a quarterback when he does that. We've said, look how he's spreading the ball around. He's getting it out there. He's moving it around. But this is where I'm going to say but. There's a phrase that I've come to love over the years that last night I finally connected it to football and how it works here. It's this phrase that says you keep the main thing, right? Now, look, if Mike Evans is your number one receiver, he is your main thing, right? And he should be getting the majority of targets. I don't care how many tools and weapons you have in the cupboard. So, now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I think it's possible to have too many weapons for Winston. I know some people have started asking that question, do we have too much going on here? But I do think you have to do the good, disciplined work of keeping the priority on your main guys. And what I would like to see, so I'll wrap all this together. I would like to see going forward, even here, just 2 games left is all we have. I want to see more targets to Mike Evans. And I think when we see more targets from Mike Evans, we're going to see the play out of Mike Evans like we're used to seeing. And that's not because he's all of a sudden getting more targets. It's just he's our main guy. Let's go to that guy and allow him to be Mike Evans. And, you work your way down with that. So it was, like I said, final thought just kind of coming out of the game. Any thoughts from you on that whole idea?
Oh, I think you're going to get your wish. And I don't really think it has a lot to do. Well, it has a little bit to do, but Jameis Winston almost said as much, after the game in his presser. There's still people on Twitter or people will text him or whatever. It's like, you got to get the ball to Mike Evans, man. You got to get the ball to Mike Evans. And he goes, you're right. And it's sort of one of those things that redawned on him, as it did all of us, when he threw the ball like a 50-50 ball into double coverage. And Mike Evans came down with it. And you kind of went, oh, yeah. Like, that's why, he goes in the first round of fantasy football. Like, that's why, he's considered before this season a top 3 NFL wideout. You saw those things. You're like, oh, yeah. Besides that, I think James is going to try real hard, especially since we're out of the playoffs and it doesn't really matter if he forces some balls, that he's going to try to get Mike Evans 1,000 yards.
Right.
And I'm looking it up right now, and he is at 839. So,
we have 2 games to go 160 yards.
Yeah. So,
80 yards
I
a
think
game. Yeah.
As far as Jameis Winston goes, that's, I think personally, is going to be, it's up there on what he wants to, as a goal. Like, you always have set goals. Like, what's your goal these last 2 games? I think that's in his top 3, is to get a win. Win the last 2 games. Obviously, don't turn the ball over and get Mike Evans 1,000 yards. Like, I think those are, like, that's it. That's what he's got on his mind. And so yeah, I think you're going to get exactly what you just said.
Yeah. And, some of it's going to be a little bit just by necessity, right? Because D-Jax went out. He was in a boot. Very likely he's just not going to return for the rest of the year.
Right.
Yeah, I hate to say it, there's just really no reason for him to, especially if he's got any kind of lingering injury. Maybe we'll see him come back. Who knows? Possibility, the same thing with O.J. Howard.
Right.
We talked a little bit last night. Like, Cam Brate looks like he's taken more lumps and more of a beating this year. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully we don't lose Brate and Howard at the same time. That would not be great. But
Claire Cross.
Hey, listen. Hey, I think Adam Cross had a really cool splash play yesterday. Eau Claire got a great catch right in the middle of the field. So who knows? Maybe we'll see a little bit more of those guys, and I wouldn't mind that either. All right, Ren, before we get to grades, I do want to talk about something that happened during the course of the game that we actually, I don't think, talked at all about last night on the Instant Cast, but we have to cover it because it was the theme of the entire night. Jon Gruden getting inducted into the Ring of Honor. I'll toss it to you. Thoughts on the whole induction ceremony and everything surrounding that?
It was corny and cheesy, I talked about, Javier came on the Instacast last week, after the loss to the Lions, and that was like one of the things he was looking forward to. He's like, I don't know how the game's going to go, but I'm looking forward to halftime. And after he hung up, I said, well, you better book a ticket because they don't show that stuff on TV. But since Jon Gruden works for ESPN, they did. They showed it live.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Yeah, they did. So, it was whatever. It was Jon Gruden, man. A little fiery about half the crap that he said. Like, you really didn't believe. It's just kind of coaches speak and him. What an offense. Like, okay, man, dude, whatever. As he's like naming off the players and. But then
not naming off other players.
Yeah, not naming off. He did say Mike Allstott, not Mark Allstott. So that's
he
good.
did. Yeah.
But then there's things where he said and you felt like he really, really meant them, like where he turned to him and like thanked them for putting up with him. Thanking his wife for her sacrifice. Like those, you felt like he really meant those. And then other things where it's just, he's just like a hype, just sounded like a hype man, just yelling stuff and didn't mean it at all. The whole thing with the running the end zone at the end, I thought that was goofy as hell. I could have cared less if I saw that, honestly. At first, I thought it was cool. I thought it was going to be really cool if they were going to call Spider 2Y Banana, but they I don't know if that's the play or not. I'm sure lots of our listeners know what Spider 2Y Banana actually looks like. I seriously doubt that was the play, but whatever. It was nice. Everyone seemed to enjoy it. The mass bring back Gruden or John next year, or name your chant, anti-cutter chant. They didn't happen, but everybody predicted it. Like everybody, all the talking heads, all the local guys. If they didn't come flat out and say this is going to happen, they did say it's going to be real interesting to see the fans' reaction, and you knew what they were talking about.
Right.
But none of that happened, and it was. I guess it was cool to see. It was like, Jon Gruden.
It reminded me of Y2K. You're just waiting. Is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Nah, it's not going to be. Think, oh yeah, it is. I'm telling you, nah, it's not. Well, maybe. I don't know. Let's find out. And then
they're going to fall out of the sky.
Right. And then it's the clock turns and the ball's still 3 seconds late. And all right, I guess we're gonna go.
That it?
Home now. Right.
Okay.
You say it was goofy and corny and stuff like that. I got to be honest with you. I thought in a lot of ways it was really cool. Personally, and this is my own opinion, I think it might have been the best Ring of Honor induction ceremony that I've seen so far. Obviously I saw the Malcolm Glazer one earlier this year. The other ones I've just seen, on Buccaneers.com, because as you mentioned, unless apparently you work for ESPN, they don't show those things. So, it was the most fun that I've had, and it was certainly the most, or the least, it
was nostalgic and brought a smile to your face.
Yeah.
To see Gruden down there talking about those players, talking about that team. Because,
and even like the Mike Allstott running it in, the one thing I really wish would have happened is that Gruden would have said into the microphone what the name of the play was. Boys, run, whatever, rather than just saying, I'm going to call it in, and then, the guys go over there and line it up, and apparently Warren Sapp is a left tackle. So,
yeah, right? Yeah. And I think Derek Brooks was playing tight end.
Right, something like that. So, but I thought it was fun. Gruden did go over his time. Apparently they gave him a 3-minute time limit, and he took about 4.5 minutes. I know because I clocked it. Now, and I'll say this, kind of watching the video boards, and I know a lot of that is nobody's going to say anything negative about Gruden, going into the Ring of Honor, on that day. But, listening to Warren Sapp and Derek Brooks and Rondé Barber and some of these guys talk about their memories of Coach Gruden, and just thinking on it more, I am more convinced than ever that his place in the Ring of Honor is well-deserved and well-earned. I still don't put much stock into the order that people get into the Ring of Honor. I know that there are people out there, people that I respect a lot, who think that other people should have gotten in first. I just don't think there's much there. I don't think there's an order to how people get in. I could be wrong. I just don't. But
You're wrong.
I might be. But the biggest thing, no Gruden chance. I didn't see big signs. I didn't see the banners. And honestly, I'm really grateful for that because I think that kind of crap would have really detracted from Jon Gruden's big night, and he didn't need that. I don't think it wouldn't have been, to use an old school word, it wouldn't have been a blessing to Jon to have people calling for him to come back and coach, like in that moment. He'd be like, no, don't do that right now. So, anyway, so that was Ring of Honor. All right, Ren. Well, with that, unless you have anything else you want to talk about, why don't we get to grades? And we'll say, how did you grade out the team for this game?
Well, you got to give the offense an A, not an A plus. They did have some 3 and outs, but they knew that they were going to have to put points up, and they did. And when the chips were down, they went down the field, scored a touchdown. The defense got on the ball back. They went down the field and put the team in a position to tie it up. The offense, like we've talked about, had a lot of injuries too. At one point when they were going 4 wide, it was Freddie Martino, Humphreys, Evans, and Chris Godwin, and there was nobody left. Like, Bobo was inactive. Like, those were the last 4 guys out there. So, I give the offense an A. They ran the ball okay, not great. Pass protected okay, not great. And like I said, had some 3 and outs. When the defense sort of halfway through the third quarter did give them a chance to actually take the lead, they couldn't pull through. And then eventually Atlanta went down and scored and got up by 10, scored a touchdown, went up by 10. And but like I said, they answered the bell and came back. The defense, it's one of those things where everything we've said they've been doing wrong, they did again this week. But man, they just didn't have the horses to run with Atlanta, And like you said, there was none of those plays like in Buffalo or in New Orleans where they're all standing around watching one guy try to tackle that guy and he got away from the tackle and ends up going in for a touchdown, or ends up picking up the first down that, seals the game. If you would have stopped him there, we got the ball back and had a chance to win, but everyone said, like, none of that. Like you said, they competed. They competed. No matter who was out there, they competed. But, in the end, you gave up like 250 yards in rushing. You got 1 sack. That was literally Atlanta's last offensive play of the game. So this is, I'm going to give a C minus.
Okay.
And then special teams, I'm going to have to give him an F, I thought Anger did well. When you miss the game-winning field goal, there's no. I don't care if I like the guy or not. I even if I've given special teams an A and he's never missed a kick and he's been in the league for 10 years, there's no like, hey, that was a moral victory. No, like, you missed the game-winning field goal. That's like Jameis Winston fumbling and getting sacked. Not giving his team a chance to win, to throw it in the end zone for a Hail Mary, or the defense not stopping. Like, you have a 4-point lead and the other team has the ball with a minute left and no timeouts, and they go down and score a touchdown. Like, there's no getting around it. Even if you would have won 3-0, like, you failed. So I'm giving them an F just because, Murray missed it, but I'm with you. I'm glad he's here. I really don't think he's going anywhere. I like, he's got that attitude, that sort of, he's a football player. He wants to stick his nose in there. He
did, right? On, I think it was the opening kickoff. He was the guy, or at least he was in on the opening tackle of the game.
Yeah, he got stepped on, I think. Yeah. He tried. He definitely tried. He stuck his nose in there.
Right.
I think he got bent and he got folded up, but
he was at the bottom of the pile. I was worried about him for a minute.
Yes, exactly. He was at the bottom of the pile. Did he make the tackle? I don't know, but he was in the pile.
He was in there.
So he wants to work out with the guys. He wants to. I heard him say on one of his radio shows, I think it was one with Casey, where pound for pound, he wants to be the strongest guy on the team. He knows he never will be, but pound for pound, he's going to put all the work in. He sees himself as a full-fledged team member and a football player. He doesn't see himself as, I got a pretty cool, cushy job over here, and I make a lot of money. I really don't have to do that much. Sort of like, a guy
go
on the outside.
Kick 5 times and then be done for the day.
Yeah, and of course your teammates are going to say, yeah, he's our guy, we love him, but there's a difference between loving your kicker because he's your teammate and loving your kicker because he's part of your team.
Yeah, that's well said. Well said. Somebody tweet that.
Yeah. Sorry. So that's it. An F. An overall, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was pleased with myself with that as well. I was just sitting there smiling.
Ren was basking in his own glory.
So overall, let's see what I have. A C minus, and an F. I guess, that could average out to a C minus. A and the F make a C, and you got the minus, C minus. So, yeah, like we've said since the pod started, hell of an effort, just didn't pull it out in the end. And if you don't, there's the moral victories are over. But God, they were beat to hell, and it was almost a David and Goliath feel. By the end of the game, watching the players that the offense and the defense were having to put out there, and and try to stop the reigning NFC champs and the reigning NFL MVP. Agreed.
For grades for me, I'm actually pretty close to you on most of these, Ren. The offense, I'm giving them an A minus. Jameis's play was really outstanding, and how they cycled through the various people, seeing Mike Evans kind of have a nice little resurgence. I thought our running game was fairly decent, with Peyton Barber there at the helm, and even Charles Sims. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think Charles Sims has been playing the best football of his season these last couple of games. They did have that fumble though, the Peyton Barber fumble, which I think prevents this from being a higher grade. But they outside of that one time they scored. Every time they got down there. So, listen, I'm going to give it to them. A minus, well done by the offense. I applaud you guys. The defense, I also give them a C minus. In my book, C means average. And I thought they looked average mostly.
Right. Mostly because you didn't have a really chance in the first place.
Right. And I mean, so here's the thing. I wouldn't say they shut down Julio Jones, but Julio Jones didn't run roughshod over him like he did last time.
Wasn't the reason we lost.
No. Now they certainly had a lot more trouble with Devontae Freeman, of course, considering he didn't play in the last game. They had a lot more trouble with him, but his counterpart was Coleman, I think, from the last game.
Yeah.
But either way, they certainly had a bit more trouble containing the run in this game. But, a C minus. The game didn't get out of hand by any stretch of the imagination. The defense kept the offense in the game. So I give them a C minus. There was nothing spectacular about them, but it wasn't the most horrendous defensive effort I've ever seen all season either. Now with special teams,
no.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was saying no, you're right. Yeah, that was not the worst defensive effort I've ever seen. It's more like you did better. You didn't do really that well, but you did a lot better than I thought you were going to.
Right.
That's kind of how you feel,
Right.
It's
so you
really didn't
grade.
Play well,
right.
But damn, you played a lot better than I thought you were gonna.
Right. But if you played better than even that, then you would have got a higher grade.
Yeah.
Now with special teams, I am a little bit higher on special teams than you are, Ren. I gave them a C minus. Certainly the missing the kick at the end hurts them. But where I really was kind of focusing this was looking at some of the other return or some of the other special team aspects, like were they able to stop their punt returner or their kickoff returner? And I felt like their return guys got way too many yards during a lot of the special teams plays. Now, nobody took off and broke off for returning a kickoff for 90 yards to get a touchdown. Nothing like that happened. Nobody broke off for 60 yards. But, there were times when you'd see them get that 20, 30 yards and run through and kind of, slip some tackles. So it was an average. I'm kind of even forgiving the Pat Murray miss a little bit here on this one. It was an average special teams play. Sort of, like a little bit, just a hair below average to me. So they get a C-. Now, when I calculate all that out, puts me in as a team grade of F. And I'm going to still stick with it. They lost the game. Ultimately, they failed to meet their goal. However, Ren, for this week, I mentioned that we don't really, we've talked about it a lot. We don't deal with moral victories, but in this case, I'm making an exception. So if I were to actually grade out this team without just the you lost, so you get an F, I think that this game to me would put the team at about a B-. I think this team performed way better than we thought they would. This was a much better game that they played collectively than certainly we ever expected them to be. And so to me, it was a hair above average at a B-. But officially it's going to go down as an F for me. They failed to meet their goal, which was to win the game. And that's where I'm leaving that one.
You know what? Now that I think about it, this game is kind of what I expected every game out of the Buccaneers. Week 1. Like, this is sort of what I expected. Like, the offense to be sharp. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's face it. It's 2 weeks in a row now. They haven't settled for a field goal.
Yeah.
And they were going in. They were going in when Peyton Barber fumbled on the 5. Like, they were going to go in. So, but this game, like, from week 1, this is what I expected. A sharp offense that was really hard to stop and a defense that put a lot of effort out on the field. They weren't going to be a top 5 defense. They weren't, teams are going to be able to move the ball against them. But man, you really were going to have to put together a nice drive to score. And if you're a mediocre team or a below average team, we win by, 7, 8, 9, 10 points. If you're a top team, it's a coin flip. And this is kind of that after watching that game, I'm like leaving that game and thinking about it now for about 24 hours now. Mm-hmm. That's sort of how I feel. Like, that's the Buccaneers team that I expect to see week 1 and throughout the whole season.
Fair enough. Well, fans, this is where we're going to turn it back on you. And now we would like to know your thoughts on our thoughts. That's our final thoughts on the game. You can let us know your thoughts by shooting us an email to thepewtercast@gmail.com, or you can find us on the Twitter sphere at thepewtercast or on facebook.com/thepewtercast. We do respond to all forms of feedback, and it is one of the more fun aspects of being a part of this Bucs fan community. Now, Ren, these last couple of weeks, we have kind of split this show into 2 things, offering them at separate times throughout the week. I think we're just looking at the time right now. I think we're going to go ahead and do that again this week. So we'll put this first half out as its own podcast. It'll come out a little bit earlier, and then a day later, we'll put out the next segment, which will be the fan interaction segment, where we'll get to the emails, comments, questions, and all that kind of stuff. So, guys, we're going to catch you in just about another day. But until then, for Rendax, I'm Brent Allen saying, go Bucs.